Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Welcome to Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist and author and the creator of the awareness integration theory. So thrilled to have you join me today for what I promise to be not only an insightful discussion, but a learning for all of us, and hopefully an information that would inspire us, motivate us to help, to do something within our own environment. In this episode, I talked to Erin Williamson. She's a licensed social worker and is the Chief Program and Strategy Officer at Love 146 organization. She leads efforts to prevent child trafficking and exploitation. With over 20 years of experience in social services and child protection, Erin has developed trauma-informed programs that have reached thousands of vulnerable youth across the U.S. She's also a parent, advocate, and an expert in human trafficking prevention and survivor care. In 2014, Erin was hired by Love 146 to build a survivor care program in Connecticut. Starting as a single staff member, the program now has over 20 staff and serves over 125 to 150 youth annually. Erin oversees all U.S.-based programs, including a prevention education initiative implemented in over 30 states. Her leadership has expanded Love 146's reach, focusing on trauma-informed care and addressing the complex needs of youth through the healing power of relationships and community support. Committed to bringing her on-the-ground knowledge to impact system change, Erin has served on several state and national policy advocacy committees, including the Connecticut Trafficking in Person Council and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Service National Advisory Committee on the Sex Trafficking of Children and Youth. Locally, she contributes as a Board of Education member in Woodbridge, Connecticut. You can get more information about these programs at love146.org. Some of you might think this is not happening in the back corners of your own city. I promise you, if you start looking, it's amazing. It's everywhere. It's not just overseas. It's here, probably somewhere even close to you. So the more you know, the more you could educate yourself, the more you could bring education to your community in all the ways, and even into your own home. If you have a youth, if you have someone that's a young adult or a teenager, the way that you could learn how to educate them. Because sometimes they might have friends that they know about, that they can support somehow. So this is a serious matter, and I hope that you take it seriously into your heart and learn more about this. I learned a lot from her, and I hope that you do as well. Now, be sure to subscribe to my podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of my social media. Please go to Foojan app. And, we have an AI companion for you that only responds from the awareness integration theory for you. And you can ask questions and she'll answer you. And we have guided journaling in 32 areas of life where you can really look, reflect, learn skills, and create fulfillment for yourself in your life and everyone around you. So love to hear from you. Share thoughts with me, because I want to know, and I want to make this better and better every time you listen to this podcast. Now, without further ado, here's Erin Williamson.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month, and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, 3 experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
It is so nice to have you, Erin Williamson, with us from Love 146. I was just, before I came on the show, I was watching the video about how Love 146 got started. And it is so heart-wrenching and heartwarming all at the same time. So thank you for all that you do, and what got you there, and what got you to want to bring your world and what you had and your love, your background as a social worker, your commitment to this type of a work. So if you could explain a little bit about Love 146 and what got you there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So yeah, Love 146 works with children and youth who've experienced human trafficking. And we have programs overseas as well as here in the United States. And I myself have also worked both overseas and here where I'm based in the United States. And I think what really has kind of compelled me on this journey and really has driven my work at Love 146 is that early on, in my career, actually, when I was studying abroad, I became very aware of how many children were living on the streets. And at that point, I was in Kenya and really became aware that especially for the girls, one of the ways that they kind of stayed safe was to group themselves into a group of girls with an individual who would really basically sell them for sex in order to provide them security and protection. And really was stunned by that coming from the United States. And then after I graduated, went and also worked with street children in Mexico. And like many people who work in this field or who become aware of this issue, first initially thought it happened only over there, right? This is something that happens in other countries. This is something that happens there. And as I really delved into the issue and became more astute and started learning, I really realized how much trafficking there was also here in the United States. And as somebody who also has a background in mental health services, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, really wanted to make sure, how do we make sure that the services we're providing are effective, right? There were many people when I first started in the early 2000s who we were young ourselves, out of school, we were doing the best we thought by the youth that we were serving. But we've really, over the years, grown to develop a program that's actually now being rigorously evaluated for outcomes with that belief that we have to make sure that the services that we're providing to children, especially mental health services, are impactful and effective.
Beautiful. I know that I was listening to one of your interviews, and you brought an amazing conversation about a lot of times, when we're looking at trafficking, we go toward the law and say the law has to change and these are the things. But then you were also bringing, yes, that has to be done, but that's kind of at the end of the game. And how can we have some preventive measures? Because the more that you give tools, the more that you give ways of how a person can have skills in how to manage and create income for themselves, that it would minimize the need for that child. I mean, obviously, we still have sex trafficking groups that they abduct the kids and they hold them, and there's a way that they won't allow them to get out. But however, there's also the concept which you were sharing is sometimes they come in because that's the only way, the only skill, and the only protection they have, or even when there are times that with the legal system, when these gangs are disrupted, that if the child does not have, or the young adult does not have the skills in how to create money, there's a way that pulls them right back in, and there's always another predator which will hold them and take them in. So your program and what you shared was about how to bring these type of systems which could create prevention. Can you share a little bit about that, please?
Sure. Yeah. We really do believe in prevention at Love 146. Kind of our vision is a world without trafficking and exploitation. And you're right, we're not going to get there by simply providing services after exploitation has already occurred. We have to focus on prevention. And when we think of prevention, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? There are the systems and structures that make certain individuals more at risk, right? If you are struggling to have your basic needs met, to get food, to ensure you have a safe shelter to live in, right? That's a vulnerability that traffickers can take advantage of for sure. And they oftentimes do. Traffickers do prey, for example, on homeless youth. But also if you're a youth or a child that's system involved, for example, maybe child welfare involved, and really what you're craving is a family or a father figure or, just love and attention that you've never really felt like you received, traffickers will take advantage of that as well. And so I think we really do need to kind of tackle prevention on multiple layers, right? We need to look at the systems and structures that make kids vulnerable, but then we also need to help children identify kind of where are healthy ways to get their needs met and what are maybe unhealthy or potentially dangerous. And that's not to put the onus on children. Obviously, we don't want to ever, we should be creating a world in which children don't have to protect themselves. But the reality is that there are people out there that want to take advantage of our children. And so we want to make sure that they have the information and skills so that if there are red flags, if something is happening in a relationship, that they're able to say, this seems off. And I remember being told, or I remember somebody saying once, kind of trust that gut instinct. And, many of the kids that we work with, trafficking is something that actually happens to them after many other things have already happened to them, right? They might have already experienced sexual abuse at home, or they may have already experienced, an incarcerated family member or system involvement. And so again, it's also about teaching kids, positive coping strategies, right? How do you, when you're feeling that anxiety, when you're feeling that frustration, maybe when you're feeling a desire to run away, what are other things that you can do that will be less risky and put yourself at less risk for potential harm? And so I think when we think about prevention, we really have to think of a multi-tiered approach. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that, I think some of the laws do need to change, right? I think that social media has been, there's very little regulation around social media. Traffickers have really exploited lack of regulation around social media to reach, hundreds and thousands of children. And really, when you think about grooming in person, a trafficker usually can only approach one child at a time, whereas on social media, you can approach 50, 100 kids on time, and you just need a couple of them to kind of take that bait for you to begin grooming them and seeing how far you can push that youth.
Mm-hmm. So when you, since you have worked both in the United States and across the world, how do you see the distinct differences between some of these manipulation techniques or the way that they come in, and what is based on the differences? What kind of preventive support do you and your organization offer?
Yeah. So, some of it's very much the same, right? With basic needs, for example, kids need food no matter what country they're in. Kids need shelter and love, even kind of those non-hard, tangible things, love, attention, care. They need that no matter what country they're in. And so if that's something that's missing in a child's life, providing that, meeting those gaps really is a preventative measure. That's not only prevention to human trafficking, but prevention to a lot of other things that can happen to a child that's kind of looking for their basic needs to be met. And so that can be really important. I do think, though, that sometimes what we see in terms of recruitment and grooming, that can be different based on the country that you're living in. For example, many of our children in the United States, there is not a desire to go to another country in search of a better life, right? Many of our children who are from the United States are also exploited in the the United States. Whereas we do see a lot of children who are coming across the border, especially unaccompanied children, at really high risk for trafficking, right? Because they're coming, especially by themselves. They're looking for some sort of guidance. Oftentimes they can have an adult who promises to help them, support them, guide them. Sometimes you'll have smuggling situations that will then become trafficking, where initially there was an agreement between that child or that child's parents and the smuggler, and then kind of at a certain point in the journey, that smuggler changes the rules and really starts exploiting that child. And so we also see that. And so, sometimes children are trafficked for sexual purposes. Sometimes it's for labor, right? There's been a lot of stories in the news lately about children in the United States under 18 being trafficked for labor exploitation. And then we also see sometimes where it's both, right? Where it's both sex and labor. And again, a lot of it is also the narrative that the traffickers tell these children, right? Very rarely is a child physically detained. We sometimes see that, but way more often we see traffickers saying to children, oh, the police will never believe you. No one's going to do anything about it. All they'll ever think of you is that you're, this, and they'll use an explicit word, a whore, or, whatever they're going to use to that child to kind of name them or they'll blackmail them, right? I will share these photos. I will tell your parents I have someone in your home country or whatever it is. And so we oftentimes see a mixture of kind of that Stockholm syndrome. You need me. You can't do anything without me. And also that threatening of, if you even try to leave, these are all the negative repercussions that will come to you. And unfortunately, sometimes, what the traffickers tell children will happen does happen, right? Unfortunately, we do sometimes see that when children disclose their trafficking, that they're not met with kind of a warm reception or an understanding that this was not their fault, right? And so that reinforces that narrative of, this is all I ever am, this is all I ever will be. And so again, you see that cyclical nature sometimes, where children who will kind of have figured out how to get themselves out of the situation, or will have somebody else will help them out of that situation, will then re-enter because some of what that trafficker has told them will happen is coming true, and therefore they believe everything that trafficker has told them in terms of their value and their worth and their potential future.
Yes. Now you also have a huge request for this, right? I mean, obviously in the news, we keep hearing that very, very wealthy people are requesting this type of services, so that there's a unique business angle through this that keeps feeding it, even, feeding it from people who are very reputable in the society. We hear later on, after, they've been incarcerated for child trafficking, and you're shocked about why would that even be a problem? And yet you see that it is. So in a system, as you say, where there's a desire and a business for it from a couple of angles, and the products are children who are needy at that moment. They need protection. They need to be fed. They need some family system. And as you say, sometimes the perpetrator is not necessarily the family, but the group together becomes such a family together that they sometimes even stay or even protect each other, because if they think that I'm running away or I'm going, whether I get killed or not, that I'm possibly, I figured out the game and I'm just gonna, protect the ones that are coming. So how do you infiltrate into this whole system that it seems to feed itself, to be able to create some sort of health for these children? What are some of the systems for the preventions that our listeners are listening and saying, okay, I could support this kind of a prevention. What should I look for? And where is that some of these interventions could happen from different angles, right? One is the child itself, one is the system, one is, ways to be able to revert some of these angles of utilizing children as products to end. What are your thoughts and experience throughout these years?
Yeah, so we do have a prevention curricula called Not a Number, and it's a 5-module curriculum that brings kids together that does really talk to them about kind of healthy relationships, grooming and recruitment tactics. It's really a skill-based curriculum that is designed to help kids both recognize unhealthy situations that they might find themselves in, and then also practice how they would respond so that it becomes more second nature. I will say that while many of the children that we work with might not be attending school regularly, although I will say some are, your straight A students that you would not suspect are being trafficked. Schools are kind of the number one place that children have identified as a potential system for intervention. Many of the children who have been surveyed or who we've served have said, I wish a teacher had kind of asked me more questions, or I feel like a guidance counselor could have noticed that I was absent at the same time or at the same period, or I was always coming in tired. And, and they assumed kind of that I was doing bad things, right? Maybe they assumed that I was delinquent or that I was engaging in bad behavior, that I was running away because, again, I was, whatever kind of story they have told themselves, when in reality, if that teacher, that counselor, that principal had approached me and asked me more questions, I probably would have eventually disclosed something, right? And a lot of kids do stay connected to school, even if they're only going once a week, twice a week, they're only going half days. I think sometimes we think, oh, well, let's focus in on the kids that are regularly attending school and really make sure. And sometimes we're, I think, too quick to write off the kids that are not attending or only partially attending. But I think those are opportunities for intervention. If instead of thinking, oh, well, they're only making it to school 2 days a week, ask yourself, gosh, why do they continue to come 2 days a week, right? What is happening here that makes them compelled to come? Because they probably know they're not doing well academically in your class. They probably know that they might not pass that year of classes, but they're still choosing to come. And so there is still this opportunity for intervention there that you have if you create a safe space.
And after you create that kind of a safe space, where are there spaces where these kids can go to? Are they taken to families? Are there adoption families? How does if that happens where you're educating a child, she or he shares what's going on with you, and then what are some of the other systems that can go and follow to protect the child afterward?
Absolutely. And it somewhat depends on the situation, right? Sometimes we do have children that are being trafficked by their family members, and sometimes their family is not safe, and that child does need to be removed from that family for their safety. Sometimes that child is already system involved and is living with a foster family or in a group home setting and is being trafficked out of that foster family or that group home. And sometimes, that child is, and many times we find is living at home, is with their family, and their family's just not aware. Again, maybe their family has told their own internal narrative about why that child keeps running away or why. It is not uncommon for us to show up at a family's house and talk to them and have that parent say, something similar happened to me and I swore that wouldn't happen to my child, right? I experienced some sort of sexual violence and we also have the opposite, right? Sometimes we have parents who will say, I got over it, they should get over it, right? So sometimes we also have to work with parents and their own trauma that they've experienced and help them understand kind of their own trauma response to what their children have experienced. And so a lot of times our goal, especially if the parents are not part of the exploitation and or we're not aware of the exploitation, is to work with that parent to help them understand the dynamics of trafficking and help them navigate, again, if they're having their own trauma response, get them connected with their own services, but also them help to support them in navigating what has happened and what what that child needs to kind of get out of the situation that they're currently experiencing. And so we actually work with children long term. Most of the kids that we work with, we're working with them for 9 to 18 months. It's really intensive services. Some of our youth, for example, have special education needs, IEPs or 504 plans. We become involved with that child's IEP, and we'll go in and advocate with the school. Sometimes we're, providing more of the mental health services. If that child's trafficker is going through the criminal justice system, we're oftentimes providing advocacy and support through that criminal justice system. So it really does matter kind of what the situations are and the dynamics are around the trafficking exploitation, because you don't want to assume that just because trafficking is occurring, the best option is to remove that child from their family, right? Sometimes that can be another trauma, especially if that parent or legal guardian was not part of the exploitation.
I worked with a couple of organizations that were foster care. We were training foster parents and working also with biological parents to go through, and some of them were going through the court system to have the ability to get their children back. And definitely my experience had been that it's so sometimes the children are so abused and going from one foster care to another that they don't feel even safe within the system. And not necessarily that a foster parent was not trying very hard to do that, but the child had gone through so much abuse from their own parent and then into some foster care system that they weren't having the ability to trust, even if that was if the family was trying to really help. And you could see these process where they would seek help someplace else, or they would get into, I have to protect myself regardless, and then will find themselves in the hands of someone who is going to come in and lure them in, and then yet show them as if like you're benefiting from this, and then bring them into a whole other system. And it was very, very hard, especially, children who were going by 10, 12, and all the way to 18. And then also I worked at the youth shelter, which, the youth, kids under 18 would find themselves coming. They would sleep on the street, and then they find themselves coming in. Those you could see that also had, the base of having the ability to be lured in with drug and sexuality and protection and all of it, because they couldn't go back home because of whatever was happening, in the dynamic of their family. And I think those children who have been abused or not part of a system of a family that could really be loving and attentive have higher risk, as you say, of being exploited in so many different layers. And you see, like they need a lot of love and support, and it takes a while before they can trust anybody, for them to be able to give information and accept some support and help. What are your suggestions in that? For example, if people might see this or might, have a guess that this might be happening, how could the public support you supporting, the youth?
Yeah, so there's a couple different questions in there in terms of kind of what the public can do. So, for us as an organization, we really rely on kind of donations and support from the public who find our work compelling, and our average donation is actually $25. So a lot of people think, oh, I don't have enough, I can't give, and the reality is that even small donations add up, and so we do really rely on the support of the public. I also think, though, if you're someone in your own neighborhood, right? And you're thinking, oh, I'm really worried about this person down the street, or I'm really worried about this person who might go to my church, or this person who kind of, attends school, maybe you're a teacher. Creating that safe space is more meaningful than you kind of might imagine, right? I think a lot of us think of ourselves as safe people, especially those of us who went into kind of some sort of mental health profession or are a teacher or law enforcement. And we think, well, of course, everyone in my network knows that I'm a safe person. But the reality is that unless we tell kids that they can come to us and that we'll be there for them, kids don't necessarily intuitively assume that, right? And so oftentimes what I share is, you're a safe home for your kids. But you don't know, some of your kids might have friends that don't come from safe homes. So even saying to your own kids' friends when they're over, hey, I just want you guys to know that like we really care about you in this household. And if any of you guys ever need anything, if you ever, want to talk to someone, we're here for you. You don't have to make it a huge deal. You don't have to repeat it over and over and over and make it kind of awkward. But you can put it out there in kind of a throw it out there every once in a while. And for that kid who really needs it, they may come and talk to you about it. They may come and disclose, but you also might be supporting them in a way you'll never know, right? Maybe they just always knew that, Miss Smith down the road was someone that I felt safe with, someone that I felt I could go to. And many of the youth that we do work with will note when they had kind of that safe adult, and the importance that adult played that role. The other thing I want to mention is that you talked about foster parents and, kind of that idea of, sometimes, even if you're kind of giving that child love, it can still be really challenging. And I do think that that's really a hard reality for many foster parents, right? Where you come into it with such an open heart, such a warm heart of wanting to welcome a child into your home. And I don't think that we as a society do enough of a job educating about the importance of what happens in the womb, what happens in birth to two. Like those really are things that have lifelong impact. And so, you might adopt a child at 2 years old and show that child amazing love and affection. But if something happened to that child before two, if they felt unsafe, if they learned because of what was happening around them that the world was unsafe, you will see that come out later in life in various ways. And as oftentimes we'll have children, especially children who have maybe bounced around the foster care system a while, they will say, it's too much pressure. I go to a new foster placement and they're so nice and they're so kind and they just want to be so helpful sometimes. And it's too much pressure and I don't want to disappoint them. And so that's what causes me to run. And so sometimes kids actually are trying to protect you or are worried that they're going to disappoint you. And so, I think there's no right way or wrong way to do this other than really open communication and really asking questions and allowing that child to share what they are comfortable sharing and saying, I'm here if you ever want to talk about more.
It's so important what you said. And I remember based on my work, what I really saw a lot of times, even with teens, it's that sometimes based on our love as a grown-up, we want to create something, but because we love them so much and care for them, then we get into a control factor and that control factor, then they might feel like they are disappointing you or they're not ready for this or they don't trust it or, it needs time has to pass before they can also create trust because they couldn't trust any adult that they were going through. And what I also saw was, if you are giving the message of love, you are coming with the act of love, but there's no restraint around it. And it's like, that my door is open, that my heart is open, that I will always listen. And that if you tell me what your needs are, the best of my capacity and capability, I'll tell you exactly what I can do and what I cannot do. I won't do anything behind your back. I won't, all of that. And then allow this freedom of them coming and going, allow them to show up again and say, I need a meal, or show up and just say, I just wanted to hang out for a minute. And this by itself creates that system. I worked with a woman right now, she's older, but she was trafficked by her own father with a group of other men who were paying him. And he also asked her to go and bring other kids. And these are kids. We're not even talking teenager. We're talking like 5, 6-year-olds. And, some of these kids died under the hand of the abuse and the guilt, not only the shame, but also the guilt of having to be a part of this and and they were forcing them to go bring other kids because kids trusted each other. And you could see that there's years and years of abuse and trauma that these kids experience. And as they grow up and at one point actually trying to get themselves out of the system, that the trauma continues in their life for so many years. And many of this group I've heard, like, based on everything that happened, it's interesting that you have such a love in your heart still for people and moving forward. And many of them got into the, system of caring for others. And what brought that for you? And that was part of what they always said. There was so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, did not judge me, which no matter what, I could always go there, that I could just experience the unconditional love of another human being that was there for me. And I got it, like I understood it, I felt it. And that was so beautiful that I now know, because I have that experience, of how even to give it to myself and someone else. And even like forgive the abuser and so on. So it's interesting with the success stories that after while they were able to heal themselves, there was always that point of just a free love that was coming to them.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true and the other thing I want to emphasize is if you are that person, right? If you're that caregiver, if you're that neighbor, that person in your community, also having kindness for yourself, right? A lot of times we're working with the social workers that work with us who will be kind of so worried because they're working with someone and all of a sudden they go missing, or all of a sudden something bad happens. And, we have to also remind ourselves as caretakers that it's not our job, nor is it within our power to make everything better for everyone, right? We all wish we had kind of that magic wand and we would kind of use it amongst, many of the individuals that we work with. But part of the value that caretakers offer is the recurring belief that that other individual has value, has intrinsic value, just fundamentally in who they are. And part of how you do that is you show up for them, not just when things are going well to be their cheerleader and cheer them on, but you show up for them even when things are going bad, even when maybe they've made decisions that you wish they hadn't made or that you thought could have been different, showing up for them and saying, I'm still here for you. I'm still walking beside you. I'm still going to be, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll talk with survivors that are kind of further along and they'll give speeches and they'll say the most important thing that you can do is to keep your word. And sometimes I'll push back and I'll say, even as caretakers, we're going to mess up. Right? We're not perfect either, right? I have been on my way to see a youth and had a flat tire, and all of a sudden I couldn't make that a visit, right? And that's a disappointment to that youth. And part of what you're also doing when you're a caretaker or when you're working with a youth is you're mirroring what a healthy relationship is. And a healthy relationship doesn't mean everything's great all the time. It means when things are hard or difficult or you disappoint them or something happens, that you work through it. You don't just sever that relationship. You work through that relationship and you communicate and talk. And so a lot of what we're doing, even in our day-to-day lives with our friends, with our children, with our, other people, is reflecting what is a healthy relationship. And I think sometimes, again, the children that we work with have this very distorted view of what healthy relationship means because they maybe haven't experienced that growing up. Maybe they didn't see that in their home. Maybe they didn't see that in their communities. And so their belief of what is healthy and unhealthy is not actually true to what is healthy and unhealthy. And so part of what you can do, both preventatively, but also afterwards, is show that that a healthy relationship ebbs and flows, but it's there for the long haul, right? It has a longevity to it.
Absolutely. Only for a couple of minutes left. What is it that we haven't shared that we really, really want everybody to know and how they can support you? So one way is obviously to support love146.org. Go over there to .org and really check out and what are the ways that financially they could support you. Another ways that I thought is that because you guys have training for schools, let's say teachers, social workers, counselors, and all of those. Because I don't think that as I went through school, I've been a therapist for 32 years. This wasn't, although we work a lot with trauma, but this wasn't part of what we learned. I learned a lot because obviously I was working in, foster care systems, and many of those systems open these conversations. But most people, even counselors, are not necessarily trained in this. So part of what we could do is also bring you into teaching, training the teachers, the counselors, the principals of those schools, even parents which might not know, their teen are behaving in a particular way and they don't know what to do. And, to bring that type of a healthy communication and a healthy relationship. Because some of the times, even if a parent does not know, but if they share it with their own child, their teen might be privy to knowing one of their best friends, this is what's going on with them. They got hooked based on the social media and somebody's manipulating one of their best friends and they hush. They don't want to tell their parents and they don't want to tell anybody. But this type of education really helps from like a 360 angle from all around for us to be able to support. How else? What else?
So on our website, if you go to love146.org, there's also on the top, there's a banner where you can sign up for a kind of a email series for parents specifically. And we designed this because we had a lot of parents asking us, when do I give my kid a cell phone? How do I talk to them about social media? What happens if I gave too much freedom and something goes wrong? And, we really do break down really practical ways to have these conversations and talk. And I think there's not enough resources with really practical guidance for parents and caregivers. So please sign up for that and share that. We do think that if parents become more comfortable and if we more normalize having these conversations, that in and of itself is a protective factor. I remember when my oldest child got a cell phone, me saying to him, if you're old enough to have a cell phone, you're old enough for us to have a really serious conversation about what you might come across when you are on your cell phone. And again, I think that there are these moments, these pivotal moments in life that kind of open themselves up to natural conversations, right? When they're younger, you can have conversations about, my body, my space. You can have conversations about how, as a family, we don't keep secrets. And if anybody asks you to keep a secret from your family, you tell them my family doesn't keep secrets. And then as they get older, you can have more age appropriate conversations in terms of, what does the internet have on it? What might they come across? One of the conversations I had recently with my child is you can never unsee something, right? So if you're looking at something at a video and you're wondering, should I, shouldn't I? I said, you swipe, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And so having those type of conversations and prompting them so that they know what you expect and what they can do. Otherwise, some of our kids just freeze in those moments. But the reality is, if we're giving them access to the internet on a device that they carry with them, they are going to have individuals who they don't know approach them. They're going to be exposed to materials, and we have to prepare them for that. That's on us. I do wish we did more in school. I do wish there were laws that were more protective. And in the meantime, us as parents, as caregivers, as adults in communities, we have a moral obligation, I think, to lean in and make sure these kids have this information.
Beautiful. And I know that where they can find you is love146.org.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All my information is there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for spending the time coming in, doing what you do across the world. Thank you for everybody at Love 146. I think if anybody wants to know why the organization name is Love 146, can you share with us?
Yeah, so when we had some founders, and again, like I shared at the beginning of this conversation, they also thought this was something that happened over there, and not here in the United States. And so they went to go figure out what they could do to kind of fight human trafficking. And while they were overseas and trying to figure that out, they did something that we don't recommend. But they ended up going undercover and into a brothel and being exposed to a number of children who were there being trafficked. And each child had a number attached to them. That number corresponded to a menu of sexual services and prices. And there was one child who kind of was looking out through this one-way mirror. And we don't know kind of what that child was thinking or what was going through that child's mind. But a couple of weeks later, when enough information was given to law enforcement to do a raid on that brothel, unfortunately, someone must have tipped them off, and that all the children were missing. And that child's number was 146. And so our founders named the organization Love 146 as a reminder that, this isn't just about kind of a large issue. This is about individual children, and no child should be known for a number or a price tag. And we need to meet this issue with love.
And it was beautiful hearing that he said in the interview that I went there to deal with an issue and I found an eye of a human being looking at me. And that's definitely the case. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for educating the world. And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you with everything that you have. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.